Do you resonate with any of that? I could see myself in at least a couple of those scenarios, maybe a few of those scenarios. And here's the thing that I've felt every single time that I've watched this video in preparation for today: stress. That video causes a well of stress to build up in me because I do not like messes. I don't like them. And I know this may sound kind of strange, but those of you who get this are so going to get this. I sleep better in a clean room. I do. I mean, I know that when you turn out the lights and when you shut your eyes, you do not see the room looks the same, whether it's dirty or whether it's clean. But I am telling you, if the room is dirty and you shut out the lights and I close my eyes, I still know the evil that lurks. And I can't sleep as well in a dirty room as I can in a clean room, because I don't really like messes. Now, I want to be really clear. That doesn't mean that there are no messes in my house. There are plenty. My basement, for example. I thought that I might tell you and explain to you and describe to you what my basement looks like, but then I remembered that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so I just thought I would show you. This is my tool bench. Can you find my screwdriver, my hammer, my tape measure? Can you find any of those things there? Neither can I. And it drives me crazy because I know I put it there somewhere. I spend more time looking for my tools than using my tools because my basement is such a mess. Here's another picture of my basement. Our pool table, which you can see is readily used, and behind it is the post-Christmas carnage of the things that we put out for Christmas, took down for Christmas, from Christmas, and we'll probably get around to putting up next November after Thanksgiving. Now, what this doesn't include, in full disclosure, is it doesn't include the piles of clothes that are over by the laundry machine, right? It also doesn't include the mattress. It's laying on the floor, waiting for its next experience in life. And it's been waiting on our basement floor for its next experience in life for, I don't know, half a year? I don't know. But it's patiently waiting down there in the middle of my basement floor. But the truth is, if you came over to my house, if I hadn't shown you those pictures, you would have no idea the chaos that dwells just beneath your feet. For that matter, you would have no idea the chaos that's just hovering above your head either. But that middle floor, the one that I've invited you to step into, before you come over, I clean that floor. And everywhere I think you're going to be, we spend some time cleaning. Even if that means that we've just got to pick up piles from that floor and carry it down to the basement and lay it on said mattress until you're gone. You will not see the mess that lies just beyond the basement door. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes I treat life and the messes that come along with life in the same way. There's been some messes in my life. Most of them have been pretty small. But some of the messes that I've experienced in life, either by my own doing or because I just stepped into them, some of them have been pretty big. But this is typically the way I respond to those messes. It's the same as I do with the messes in my house. I keep it hidden down in the basement so that you probably won't see it. It doesn't mean that no one will see it. There might be a few who I share a little bit with, but for the most part, when it comes to the messes of my life, I kind of keep them hidden behind the basement door so that you won't see just how messy things are. But I know I'm not alone in that, right? The truth is we all have messes, and we have all kinds of messes. We've got financial messes, we've got relationship messes, we've got vocational messes, we've got academic messes, spiritual messes, we've got health messes, we've got all kinds of messes. Every one of us does. But often what we do in the midst of those messes is we just kind of put on the best face we can. And we go to school and we go to work and we even come to church. We act like everything's okay and there really aren't any real messes in our life. And if you've ever been in a mess and you've tried to do that, you know how tiring it is to put on a front when there's a mess lying right beneath the surface. And you know what makes it even harder? What makes it even harder is sometimes when you're in the middle of a mess and you go to school or you go to work or you come into church and you look around, sometimes it looks like everybody else's life is so much more put together and that everybody else's life is so much more mess-free than yours. And sometimes those feelings can be really overwhelming because sometimes it feels like our life is the only one that's such a mess. But I've got some good news for you. When it comes to messes, you're not alone. No one is immune from messes. Everyone has either had them, is in the midst of them, or is about to have another one. That's the way life works. We are always in the midst of or going through some kind of mess. But here's what's both ironic and heartbreaking for me. This is the one place that we call sanctuary, right? This is the place where we should be able to come into and have no shame and no fear. This is the place where we talk over and over and over again about the imperfection of humanity, about the fact that every one of us is a sinner, about the fact that every one of us falls short of God's glory, about the fact that none of us is perfect. We talk about that over and over and over again. And yet it seems like, maybe not always so much in this church, but it seems like in the church in general that what we do is we try to outrighteous each other. That instead of coming into church and being real about the messes that we face in life, we come into church and we put on what years ago people called a stained glass masquerade, where we walked behind the stained glass windows of the church and we masqueraded before each other about how good and perfect our life was. And in fact, and I think this is a sin the church needs to confess. In fact, I think often the church has made people feel like they've got to come in here and outrighteous each other. That instead of confessing our brokenness, we've got to prove just how righteous and good and pure and holy and faithful that we are. It becomes a competition of perfection instead of confession of brokenness. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there was at least one or two of you that are surprised on a Sunday morning your pastor would show you those pictures of his basement. And you were thinking, why in the world would he do that? And did he ask Carrie? Listen, I'm no dummy. Of course I asked Carrie. And we agreed that we'd pull a couple pictures out that you didn't see. But you see that and you're like, wait a minute. That's really messy. Why would he show that? That's crazy for him to do that. But here's the thing that you need to know about me. I have a messy basement. I do. And I've tried to remedy the mess of the basement. I have tried. I have gone down there and there have been times when that basement has looked awesome, where we have gone down there and we have gone through everything and everything's on shelves and everything's put up and I know where every tool is because I have a wall. I don't know if you have a pegboard wall on your tool bench where there's a place for every tool. I've got that. My tools are never in that, but sometimes on the rare occasion when we clean it and it's all there and it's all beautiful and it looks so good, and you know what happens that night? Oh, I sleep so good. And then you know what begins to happen the next day? The unstoppable force of the messy basement. It's like there's nothing I can do. I can go down there and clean that thing as often as I want to, but I think like just the sweet spot of my basement is one of absolute mess. You know, the truth of life is no matter how hard we try to clean up our lives and the messes in our lives, sometimes we get to a place where we go, oh, now things are really great, and we sleep really well. And then we wake up the next morning, and the next thing you know, we're knocking on another mess. Because no matter how hard you try, your life's never going to be mess-free. Now here's the other thing that I know, and this might be a little bit harder to hear, and I'm going to assume that this isn't happening for anyone in this worship service. Maybe at 8:30 and 9:30 they were feeling this. But it's possible that someone, upon seeing those pictures, felt a sense of judgment about my basement and about me. Because someone would never let their basement get that way. And the someone who would never let his or her basement get that way looks at my basement, and the first thing they wonder is, how did their basement get in that way? I would never let my basement get in that way. And it says something about them, about their priorities, about what's going on. What is going on with them that would let their basement get that way? Here's what I would say about that, is that even if your basement is perfectly spotless and clean, that doesn't mean that you don't have skeletons in your closet, right? You can have the perfect, immaculate house. You can have the best kept and cared for car. You can have a perfect wardrobe, impeccable in every way. But that doesn't cover up the fact that no matter who you are, and no matter how you look and present yourself to the rest of the world, you've got messes in your life. I know it, and you know it. And sometimes those messes are a real problem, because the truth of the matter is that when we find ourselves in a mess, it can be a really bad situation for us and those who are impacted by it. But I'm not so sure that the mess itself is the only problem. Sometimes I wonder if the way we address the mess doesn't add to the problem. And one of the things that I've noticed when it comes to addressing the mess that we face is that we tend to get really externally focused when it comes to messes. We spend a lot of time talking about other people's basements, right? And why it would get that way. And who would ever let it get that way? And you know, right now I'm not really talking about basements, though over lunch some of you may be talking about basements. It's bigger than that, right? Jesus had something to say about that. He said it in the Sermon on the Mount. These are familiar words, but I want to unpack them a little bit, because I think it helps us to start finding a path towards addressing the mess in a way that's a little more healthy. He wrote, "Do not judge so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged. And the measure you give will be the measure you get." It's like this Jesus karma right here. If you judge, it's coming back. If you critique, it's going to come back in some way. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, "Let me take that speck out of your eye," while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Now, there's a couple things in this passage that I think kind of give us some steps, as I said, towards starting to address the mess in a way that's a little more healthy for ourselves and for the other person. And I just want to talk about, this is not a conclusive list. There are other ways that we can do this, but here are some thoughts, and you may have thought of each of these. But I never preach a sermon that I don't need to hear myself. And for me, these things have been helpful to think about. The first step, according to that passage that we read, is that we have to start with the mess in the mirror. This is where we start. And it's not just that we start there in order to make our lives and to clean up the messes that we have. Jesus wants that, and we're going to talk about that later. But there's another reason that we start with the mess in the mirror. Because by starting with the mess in the mirror, we are constantly reminded that even though our mess may look different, and even though we may think it's less than the person sitting next to us or the person that we're critical of, it's a constant reminder that we've got messes too. That nobody is mess-free. And that in the same way we might judge other people's messes, people may be judging ours. And so we start with the mess in the mirror because it reminds us that when it comes to imperfection, we are all on the same playing field. Every one of us. And we got to start there so that we enter with that spirit. The next thing that's so important is don't judge other people's messes. First of all, and just to be as clear as I can, judging others is a sin. And when we do it, we're sinning, even if we think we're doing it for all the right reasons. Don't judge other people. Don't judge their financial situation. Don't judge their vocational situation. Don't judge their marriage or their broken marriage or their hurt relationships, please don't judge their parenting. Don't judge their kids. Don't judge their health. Don't judge. It's so important. And one of the reasons I'm trying to figure out, why is it that we're so judgmental? What is behind all this judgmental stuff that we are constantly doing? And this is because I think often it always comes back to this. We react out of threat. We react out of fear. And so what happens is if I see that you're in a mess, and I think that mess is bad, and I never want to be, this is the deal, I don't want to be in that mess. I don't want to be in the financial mess you're in, the relationship mess you're in, the health mess that you're in. I don't want to be in the vocational or academic mess that you're in. And so what happens is I see it, and I start to look for the flaw in you that would lead to that mess, the fault in you that would lead to that mess. Why? Because if I can identify the fault and flaw in you, then I can avoid it in myself, because I can fool myself into believing that I would never succumb to your faults and your flaws. I think in large part, judgment is a defense mechanism. And we're trying to come up with a reason for why your life is such a mess. Because if only I can figure out that reason, then I can avoid it too. And what that leaves out is that, yes, sometimes our actions lead to messes, but life is more complicated than a direct line. And sometimes we just step into it, right? And it stinks. But it just happens. We can't judge other people's messes because we just don't know what's going on. And this brings me to this next thing, is we need to learn more about their mess. And I don't mean we need to learn more about their mess in kind of a gossipy, digging in the dirt kind of way. This is what I mean by it. And I want to build on the language that Jesus used in that passage about the speck in your neighbor's eye, right? If you're eating dinner at a restaurant or at home, and you look down in your soup, and there's a speck, what do you do? If you're laying in bed, and you're about to turn out the light, and you look up on the ceiling, and there right above the bed is a speck, and it's moving. What are you going to do? If you check into a hotel, I know, now I'm preaching. Now it's, if you check into a hotel and you look at those perfectly placed white pillows, and in the middle of that white pillow where you're about to lay your little head, there's a speck. What do? You inspect the speck, right? You go and you try to figure out what it is. And you got to look a little closer because you're not quite sure, is that pepper? Please, for the love of God, be pepper, right? Or is it something else? You won't know until you actually look at the speck. You won't know what's crawling across the roof until you get on your bed and you look. And sometimes it'll fly at you. I'm just warning you. Story for another day. And in the hotel, you're going to inspect the speck on your pillow because you don't want to put your head down there until you know what it is, right? You're going to inspect the speck because it's so small, you got to get closer to understand it. Here's the thing. What's going on in your friend's life is just a speck to you. You can't see it. Your issues, your mess, it's a plank because it's right here. And for them, the speck that you see, that's their plank because it's their plank that they've got to remove from their eye in order to help remove the speck from your eye. But the reason your plank is their speck and their plank is your speck is because you don't know what's going on. You're looking at the tip of the iceberg. You're looking at the little piece of dust on top of the dust bunny or the pile of trash or whatever it may be. You don't know. And so what we do instead of judging is we just listen and we just learn and we just sit with them in the midst of their mess. And I don't know if you've ever discovered this before, but what I've discovered is that sometimes when I'm sitting with someone, even someone I don't like, right? Even someone I don't agree with, even someone I don't understand, even someone I've been rather judgmental toward, if I sit down and I just listen to their story, my heart starts to soften. Have you ever had that happen? And you learn their story and you learn what's going on and you see the humanity in them and something starts to change in you about them. And instead of becoming something you're judging, instead of becoming an issue, they become a person. And this is the other thing that I've discovered is that we're called by Jesus to find the beauty in the mess. Because we can walk around perfectly presenting ourselves. We can walk around in that stained glass masquerade. We can do all that, and we can be fooling the world. Look how attractive we are. Look how perfect my life is. But this is what I've come to discover. The greatest beauty that I've ever found in people is not the perfect presentation of what's on the outside. It's when I sit down with them and they tell me about the broken parts, the stories that they've had to work through, the pains, the redemptive process, all of those things. They talk about the real journey, because this is what I've seen often in the messes of people's lives, is where you will find the most beautiful stories you have ever heard. But in order to find, hear, and see the story, you got to sit down with them. And you just got to listen and hear what they have to say. You know, there's this wonderful practice. There's a Japanese tradition. It's called kintsugi. Maybe you've heard of it. And if you're not familiar with the name, I wasn't. I was familiar with the practice and had to turn to the God of Google and say, what is this? And it told me it was kintsugi. But this is the practice. It's when something that they have is broken, like a vase or a plate or a clay vessel of some kind, and it breaks. They repair it. But when they repair it, the purpose of the repair is not to hide the flaw. In fact, they do the exact opposite. They highlight the flaw with gold flaking. And so the broken vessel looks like this. So when you see the vessel, it's not that they're trying to hide the brokenness. They're trying to show the brokenness. They're trying to highlight the brokenness because they see beauty in brokenness. And here's the thing, kintsugi has nothing to do with pottery and plateware. The reason they do this is because they believe fundamentally that the most beautiful part of the human person and the human experience is the human who's gone through brokenness and found redemption. Because in that brokenness, a light shines that is beautiful. And it is not something to be hidden and not something to be ashamed of, because you've overcome it. And you've done it. And you're on the other side of it. And if you're not on the other side of it yet, by God's grace, you may get there. You see, this is the story of our faith. Our faith is not a beautiful faith because it's perfect. It's not. Our story is not about perfection. If it was about perfection, then why would we have the broken body of Christ? Why would we have the shed blood of the Messiah? You see, the journey of our faith and the beauty in our faith isn't found in a perfect, pain-free, mess-free experience, because the crucifixion was filled with brokenness. It was filled with messiness. It was filled with fear and pain and worry and loss. It was literally filled with broken body and shed blood. There was nothing perfect about that moment. We know the story didn't end there, but the beauty of the empty tomb, the light that shone through the crack in that day, was only so beautiful because of the brokenness that led up to it. You see, that's the story of our faith. And when we walk around and pretend that faith is about perfect people, we forget that Jesus said, I didn't come to heal those who are healthy. I came to heal the sick. You know who's sick? Who's broken? And whose lives are a mess? Every one of us here. There's a lot of things that make you and I different from each other, and there's a lot of things that make you different from the person sitting next to you. In some ways, there are some of you who are sitting next to each other today who couldn't be more different than one another. But you know what brings you together? The messiness of life. The commonality of brokenness brings us together. And in a lot of ways, it brings us in this place. This is the story of our faith, and it's the story of who we are. And when we talk about addressing the mess, we're not talking about cleaning things up so that everything is perfect. This is what we're talking about. I'm telling you right now, if Jesus came into my house and he walked into the first floor and everything looked good and he was like, where's Brian? And he walked down in the basement, and there I was down in the midst of the basement. If Jesus came down in the midst of the basement, he wouldn't care about the workbench. And he could care less about the pool table. and the mess of Christmas stuff and the laundry and the mattress. It would not matter to him at all. He would come and he would stand right there with me in the middle of my mess. And you understand that I'm not talking about a basement right now, don't you? And you see, that's where he meets you. He's right there in the middle of your mess. And he's not as much concerned about how you got there or what led to it and all that stuff. He just wants to walk with you through it to the other side and help you find that beauty in what was once broken. And you see, we're disciples of Jesus. And what it means to be disciples of Jesus is it means this. It means that if you come over to my house and you can't find me, and you walk down in the basement, and there I am in the middle of that messy basement. The tool bench doesn't matter. Pool table doesn't matter. The clothes don't matter. What's going on with the mattress on the floor doesn't matter. You come down and you stand with me. And you understand that I'm not talking about a messy basement, right? Because this is what disciples do. We walk with each other to the basement, to the basement and the messiness of our lives so that we can find the other side. And sometimes the fact that we've been through it may be just enough encouragement for the next person to get there as well. My prayer for us is that we will be a people who begin to address the mess, not by cleaning it up, not by sweeping it under the rug, not by hiding it in the basement, but by naming it, sharing it, and walking with each other through it. May it be so. Amen.